Beautiful.
You look beautiful. Who
Your
are
hair
you?
all down. They're different from our talk the other night.
Well, we've got about 5 minutes, so talk among yourselves. You know each other.
Amongst yourselves. Isn't that a Barbra Streisand line or Saturday Night Live?
Oh, well.
Speak amongst yourselves, right? Okay. Well, let's see.
Oh,
Hi, Eileen.
but I have.
I'm Eileen. I live in the top of the building that Eric lived in the bottom of.
Oh, okay.
So we moved in the same year. He moved in when the building was still in rent control, and I moved in when it moved over to rent stabilization. So he's been in the bottom, and I've been in the top since 1971.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing.
I must have been about 12.
That was a real tenement. Huh?
Eileen, you must have been about 12 years old when you moved in.
Well, that's because of the stairs.
Hey, Paul.
Excited.
Paul,
This
I
is
don't
work.
Hi. Hello, Kathy
we've known each
Lenny.
other for what, 20
Hey,
years?
Paul Schiavo.
Paul Paccioni.
Hey, Paul. I
Hi,
haven't
Paul.
seen you.
David. Hey, great to see. Hello, Belinda. Nice to
Hi.
see you.
Nice to see you
Nice to see
too.
all of you. Yeah.
This is making me so happy. You have no idea. This is
Oh, good. That's good.
Belinda, it's so nice to meet you. Very nice to meet you.
Yeah.
meet you too. The one that's just the phone there, that's my mom.
Yeah.
Phoned
Oh, okay. Hi, Mom.
in.
Hi there.
Sort of see, 'cause there's a little bit of a Zoom.
I'm seeing everybody for the first time. Kind of fun.
So am I.
But, you know, are people going to introduce themselves and say
gonna-
how they know Eric? I mean, that's because
Absolutely.
we don't know each other, most of us.
We'll do that at one point. I'm just gonna
Okay.
sort of do a little housekeeping first, and then there are 10 people that are gonna want to speak, and then we can go around, and anybody who wants to introduce and say whatever they want to say sounds great to me. I'm just gonna, hold on. What? Oh, never mind. I'm sorry, I'm
got
just
some
getting people in. So I have to just, there's a lot of people coming in. Hold on. Music on.
Yeah, there's you.
No, me.
Should I put my face on there? Is that what's reading that?
Yes.
Juliet's
Yeah.
See your picture.
Hold on, Stanley's having trouble getting in.
Are you trying to get numbers? That's like Juliet of the Spirits.
Do people have their chat window open so we can send messages to each other?
So I was going to tell people you can do that at the bottom. If you go to if you go all the way to the bottom, you'll see a chat area, and you can write to everybody, or you can pick a person.
Yeah.
Talk to them.
I just want to see who.
Hello.
All right, everybody's on, Mom.
Can everybody hear the Elgar music?
Mm-hmm.
I
can.
I
can.
Can't? Just turn up the sound a little bit, I guess. That's the best I can.
That's good.
Just got a few more people. Hey, Alana. I've got a couple of people saying that the meeting isn't correct, but everybody else seems to be getting on. But Michael and Stanley are having trouble, so
We might have.
Hey, Tom.
Does anybody? This is exactly right.
Hear the music thing?
Nobody else seemed to have any.
You want
Just a few stragglers. And we'll start.
Linda, is that you there?
What?
Are you, which one, who is Belinda?
Yeah,
We haven't met,
the
that's
one
right.
in control of everything.
I'm the one. Mute you all. And I plan to. I'm just waiting for, oh, there's Hetty.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Are you ready for me?
Not quite yet. I'm trying to, Stanley and Michael.
Okay. Just holler when you're ready. I've got you on my phone.
I will, Hetty, thanks. I'm just waiting for Stanley and Michael, sorry.
That's all right.
And we'll all get going, sorry guys. Nobody else seemed to have a problem. No, there are two of them.
Are we connected to Lindy's phone? What thing? We're connected to Lindy's phone.
Hello?
Yeah, hold on.
Okay.
We're
I
just
just
waiting
picked
for
up.
a few people.
That's okay. I thought I had lost you for a moment.
Why does it say the meeting is invalid? I don't know what to do. I can't do both things at once, and these are his two best friends.
Everybody is connected to everybody.
Seriously, I don't know what to do.
All of us. All of us. Everybody.
We've just got 4 more people, and we'll start, guys.
Okay.
Look at you.
What else to do? Oh, I have another idea. I'll invite them later.
How to fix it.
Who's that then? Hello, who's that?
It's Octavio.
Oh, hi.
It's great to have Octavio with us.
Hi, Octavio.
Oh, I asked him to do this earlier.
Hi.
No?
Hi.
Okay. Just waiting for Stanley and Michael to say that they can't seem to get on, and I'm not sure why.
Oh, dear.
I sent them the same link that I sent. Nobody else seemed to have a problem.
You sent a second one.
It's the same link.
There was a different. The password number was different.
Oh, hey, Andy.
Hey, Lindy, how are ya?
We're all here. We're just waiting. Well, I just sent them another one direct from here.
Okay.
So I'm gonna invite them one more time, and then we'll just go, because I don't want to keep all you guys.
Lindy,
Yes.
Lois and Bing's,
They're here.
I'm
yeah,
here. Andy, I'm here.
I know, it's hard to see you.
You can't see them because they called in.
You should be able to see me because I'm on Zoom.
But it's only just a little bit of your head. So
Can't you see me?
just a little bit, but
I can see see everybody.
okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna start, and I'm gonna kind of mute everybody for a minute. Let me turn this off. Okay. Okay, I think we're almost all here. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Thank you for doing this and being here. First of all, welcome everybody. I'm Belinda. I'll tell you a little bit more about the family after, but I have a couple of Zoom housekeeping things. On the top, for those of you who haven't done this before, way in the corner, you're going to see something that says speaker view, or you can do gallery view. You can toggle back and forth. Gallery is all of us, and speaker view, when one person's talking, if you hit speaker view, you'll just see them more close up. There's also at the bottom, you see a little chat button. If you want to write a message to everybody or a particular person, you want to have a private discussion, fine. You can do that as well. At the beginning, I'm going to mute everybody just because it'll be easier to hear who's talking. And then after that, it'll be a free-for-all of sorts. I was going to have a thing where you touch and you can raise your hand, but I think we can all figure it out. The only other thing, and I apologize how this goes down. It may be a little wonky, but we'll do the best we can. So anyway, for those of you who don't know me or you know me now, I'm Belinda, I'm Eric's niece. My mother, Lois, is here on an iPad and also phone. That's obviously Eric's sister. My sister, Amy, my dad, Bing, Eric's grandniece and nephews, Alana, Jack, and Alana, and obviously all of you friends and neighbors and fellow musicians and composers. Just a couple of things. Obviously, this is not the way any of us would have wanted to get together and honor my uncle, but they're kind of unusual times, and he was sort of an unusual guy. So until the last day of his life, he was the brightest, most interesting, knowledgeable person that I've ever spent time with. He was like a human Jeopardy game. I couldn't stump him on any subject, art, history, music, theater. The more obscure the question, the easiest it seemed to him to gleefully know the answer. And as you know, you all know he kind of had a mischievous sort of smile. He wasn't your typical uncle, but there was nothing typical about him. From those of you that I've talked to and the stories I've heard. Some of the words I came up with were unpredictable, intense, private. He was incredibly sweet and caring and generous and a kind son, brother, uncle, friend, but also he was incredibly cranky and awfully maddening. I could spend hours and days talking to him, but I realized, and talking to my parents, and that there's still so much that we don't know about him. And I think we're hoping that this evening will change that, maybe just a little bit. Before a couple of people talk, Hetty Jones is here on the phone, and her computer died during the pandemic, which I think is a pretty wretched fate. And she wrote a poem for Eric, and she's a brilliant poet. Hetty, can you hear me?
Yes, I certainly can.
You're on.
Well, that's wonderful. Just a little bit about how I know Eric. We've lived on the same block for, as long as we've lived here. It seems like 50 or more years. And I don't even recall how we met, but we ended up becoming friends, and we used to have a Sunday lunch all the time at the Bee Bar across the street, where we would just hang out and eat and have a good time talking, and I miss him terribly. So this is a poem that I wrote for him, I can't remember how long ago, but
Whoops.
oh, did everybody not hear what I just explained, or did
No.
they?
No, we heard.
Oh,
We
good.
heard.
Very good. Well, I was saying that I wrote this poem. I think I wrote it maybe only a couple of years ago, but it is 7 lifelines for Eric. And I hadn't ever meant it to be a funereal poem, but it'll give you a sense of how much I really liked him and how close we were. 7 lifelines for Eric Richards. All the hot curry ever made, and all the sweet songs ever heard. Every 4:30, every slow spring Sunday, baby. Thank you for inviting me to share that. And I'm glad to meet you all, even though I can't see you because I'm just on the phone.
Oh, thank you, Hetty.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
My pleasure.
I'm going to turn this over to Paul. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mute everybody. I couldn't do it because Hetty was on the phone. And as it's your turn to talk, even though you're muted, if you press your space bar or you're on mute, you will be able to talk. Okay. So first, Paul.
Oh, okay. I'm Paul Patch.
Can we hear you?
Belinda, you have to unmute him.
No, actually, I'm muting everybody and he has to press, can you guys, I'm sorry, hold on. Can you hear me, guys? No? Yes?
Yeah, we can hear you, Belinda. You just need to unmute Paul.
Well, what I was going to do is mute everybody, and then as the person who talks can just press the space bar and talk. Would you prefer me not to do it that way?
Belinda, you just have to unmute Paul right now. That's it.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out. I have mute all and unmute all.
Go to Paul's box.
Oh, I see. Okay, fine. Got it. All right, I'll try it.
Go in the chat.
I'll do it. I got it. Sorry, where is Paul? I have to find him. Here you go. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Can they hear me now? Yeah. Okay, good. I just wanted to, I'm Paul Paccioni, Molly Paccioni. We wanted to express our sympathy to the family, and we wanted to thank Melinda for being able to, for doing this under such difficult circumstances. Eric and I were lifelong friends. We could talk about anything under the sun. We could talk about books, music, politics, travel, food, and of course, there always had to be some gossip. He was also the most constant influence on my own musical life. I just want to briefly read something that I wrote about Eric when I first met him at a very pivotal time in my own life. I first met Eric in 1970 at the Mannes College of Music in New York City. At that time, in 1970, Mannes was a relatively small private music conservatory located in 3 adjoined brownstones on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Eric was on the faculty at Mannes, and he taught the freshman music theory class. Now, a freshman music theory class is not the first place one usually goes to or expects to find inspired, out of the ordinary music making. But that year in Eric's class, she found that and more. He was an extraordinary teacher, and he turned that class into something much more than the usual general introduction to the prescribed rules of harmony. The topic was music and all of its various aspects: history, style, composition, analysis, musical expression, and influence. He put everything on the table and open to discussion. It was a small class by today's standards, approximately 10 to 12 students. Given all our various backgrounds, personalities, and levels of experience, we formed our own Dirty Dozen. And it was Eric's job to whip us into shape. The class met at 9 a.m. in a room on the second floor of the building. A few minutes before 9 a.m., we would sit in our seats with the door open and listen for the sound of his footsteps running and stomping up the stairs. He stormed into the room like a force of nature. He was full of energy. He was weighted down with a pile of books and scores under his arms that we knew were there for us to look through. He dropped everything on the desk and summoned one of us to the board. Paccioni would bellow, "Put your chorale on the board." He made my life hell that first year. And he knew it was just what I needed. For the most part, our work centered on Bach chorale harmonization, and in particular, voice leading, learning to write and hear melodies that fit together well. We'd gather around him at the piano, and he would effortlessly sight read our assignments. He'd sing the various vocal parts of the chorales using the oddest collection of vocal sounds. Glenn Gould, kind of a combination of Glenn Gould and Leonard Bernstein, when he would start conducting us, waving his hands in the air, often having to coax us to sing along with him. He looked at each of those assignments and critiqued them as if he were discussing a work of Brahms. He never made us feel as if we were just fulfilling a routine assignment. We were making real music. Everything was put into a broad cultural context. I remember one time he looked at a chorale I handed in, and it had an unusual number of voices moving in a parallel motion with each other, which from some counterpoint perspective, where all the voices were supposed to be moving independently of each other, was poor voice leading. He pointed this out to me, and he then said, "Wait a minute, I'll be right back." He ran to the library and soon returned with another pile of scores under his arms. He put them on the phone and started to play various excerpts from Copland, Stravinsky, and Satie, all of which used parallel motion quite freely. Yet all were so different from each other and had a unique character. Copland was austere. Stravinsky had these striking dissonances. The Satie was both playful and profound. What began as a careless exercise, what began as a careless error on my part, was turned into a lesson in musical style. Then he said, "Now, Paccioni, if you were Copland, Stravinsky, or Satie, what you did here might be fine, but you're not them. So for now, try to avoid so much parallelism." Then, as if he were letting me in on some kind of secret, he handed me the scores. That would be the first of many books and scores he would hand over to me. He opened his eyes wide, ran his open hand over the top of his head like this. He would always do this. And then nodding his head, gave me the sly smile you were talking about, Belinda. Eric left Mannes the following year, and he was sorely missed by all of us. But the things I learned from him in that class, and throughout our subsequent 50-year friendship, I took with me into every music course I ever taught.
That was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to put you back on speaker view. Tom Hamilton, I have to find you. Oh, there you are.
Here I am.
Okay.
And you can hear me.
Everybody hear him? Yep.
Good.
Yes? Okay.
All right. I suppose I should start by confessing that I've made other attempts to write something about Eric and have failed at the first sentence. I try to write something about the man rather than something about me, but in fact, I am only a leading expert on my own involvement with Eric over the last 18 years. Well, never mind our professional relationship, which was, of course, always gratifying because I got to apply my audio and concert production skills to his highly unique and beautifully composed music. Let me get to the crux of the matter. Though my wife Jackie and I spent many evenings having dinner with Eric, the annual highlight for many of those years was to celebrate Hanukkah together. Now, the irony of this was neither Eric nor I were observant Jews, but Jackie, my non-Jewish wife, celebrated all the holidays. We did have our traditions, and she expected him to be there. First, the invitation. Eric, you know Jackie is looking forward to Hanukkah. When do you want to come over? Well, I don't know if I'll be in town this year. I really don't celebrate holidays. You're my only Jewish friend. Okay, I suppose I could come over on Sunday. Let's talk that morning. Then he'd click. Eric would arrive with various things, and I'd take his winter coat, which I would have to hang up on the shower curtain rod because it weighed about 25 pounds. I never had any idea what was in that coat. Part of me was curious, but the more cautious part of me didn't really want to know. So then we'd light the menorah, eat gefilte fish, homemade latkes and applesauce, and I suppose a roast chicken or a brisket. After dinner, we'd have some presents. Borrowing from an old SNL routine, we'd somehow have Hanukkah Harry give pairs of socks to all three of us. Usually Eric would like the ones I got better than the ones he got, so we would trade. We would also give him a scarf or a sweater that we would never see again. Eric would give us an excessively fine bottle of scotch or vodka, which he'd never see again, so I suppose that was fair. The evening's discussion would evolve, always accompanied by Google support to prove some point or another. He would dictate search terms. Just type this in: Gene Kelly, Herbert Hoover, and Milton Berle, or something of that nature. And sure enough, he would be right. About what? I can't remember. It actually doesn't matter. It was just a process. This year we looked for another sweater that we'd never see again, but didn't find the right one. We wrapped up his Hanukkah Harry socks, and they're still sitting in a corner of the room waiting for him, or waiting for us to accept that he's just not here. Thank you.
That was gorgeous. That's funny. Wait, that was the gift?
I want to see the socks.
Yeah.
Since-
Oh, I thought everybody, okay.
The socks are wrapped up. You mean we should unwrap the socks?
Okay, Larry. Larry's up next. I have to find you in the gallery. There you are. Hold on. Having a little trouble. Larry, can we hear you? No? I'm screwing up here. Hold on.
Can I hear you? How's that? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
I put the wrong Larry. Okay, got it. Thank you.
First of all, thanks to Paul and Tom. That was really nice. And I'm just sitting here thinking how sad it is that so many old friends have been seen for a while. Lenny and Kathy, Paul and Molly, Tom, Jackie, Jody. I mean, there's that it takes a memorial to someone we loved very much to bring us all together, and even in this kind of really odd way. Alan, I noticed, is there. But it's very makes me very happy to see you all here. I just wanted to say, give you two funny little anecdotes about Eric. One from almost the first time I met him, and the other from almost one of the last times I saw him. When I was at Mills College, and David Brown will attest to this situation, Dick Miller decided he wanted to enroll at Mills, and somehow that brought Eric along with him. And Eric came out to Oakland and spent a lot of time at the CCM and with the grad students. And I hadn't really known him very well. So I said, let's go out for coffee, Eric. And we went out to a cafe on Telegraph Avenue, if I remember it correctly, called Le Bateau Ivre, which was a kind of an upscale place. And we were sitting there, and I said to Eric, hey, Eric, do you know what the name of this place means, where it comes from? And he looked at me and he gave me that smile that I think we've all seen and can all imagine, and then began to recite the long Rimbaud poem, Le Bateau Ivre, in French, as if to say, Larry, of course I know what this place is. And that was kind of astounding and made me think, boy, this guy is not just unusual, he's really, really interesting and funny as hell. It was a pretty involved and erudite joke, but it was still very funny. Near the end, not near the end of his life, but near the end of my time at Dartmouth, I'll say that Eric would come visit us a lot in Hanover, New Hampshire, and stay with us, with Jody and I and my daughter Anna, just I think to get out of New York and come to someplace a little different. And we loved having him. The Hanukkah thing is very much understood here. He was probably the only person who gave our daughter a Hanukkah present every year, probably including Jody and I. And they were always really wonderful Hanukkah presents, and Anna would look forward to them. But anyway, sometime near the end of my time at Dartmouth, I was sitting in my office and I got a phone call from the director of the art museum, the Dartmouth Art Museum. And she was a kind of a very high-level administrator who dealt with donors and all kinds of big money kinds of situations, something which I had nothing to do with and didn't want to have anything to do with, but I knew them and was friendly towards them. And they, on the phone, they said, Larry, would you mind coming over to the Hanover Inn, which was a hotel on campus, to the restaurant? There's a donor here who says he knows you and would like to invite you to lunch. And I couldn't think of who that could be because I don't really know any donors. So I kind of walk over there and I walk into this very fancy dining room with a bunch of very fancy people sitting there, and sitting at the table is Eric, smiling like he just swallowed, the cat who swallowed the canary. He looked very happy to have dragged me over to a meeting that I would never have gone to in a million years. It turns out that he had donated an Orozco painting. His father knew Orozco well, I guess. So there's a lot more to be said about that. But he had donated some very, very expensive and valuable painting to the Dartmouth Art Museum, which had already had this giant collection of Orozco murals. And you could see him laughing to himself the whole time of having sort of pulled this one over on me. And I was looking at these folks who were dressed to the nines and routinely dealt with huge endowments and donations, and wondering if they knew where Eric lived, if they had ever seen his apartment, because the dichotomy was just so wonderful and so funny. But we had a great time, and we've all seen his apartment. But it was just this kind of wonderful thing that only Eric would do, sort of pull a kind of a gag or what would you call it? A stunt on me, and knowing how I would react. And it was, then we had a great time. We had a great lunch. And I'll always remember that, just him sitting there wearing, you know, he pulled it off, and it was really beautiful. So I don't really want to say more. I don't want to take up, I know a lot of people have things to say, but as Paul, I think, said, Eric was a composer. There's never been, in my experience, a composer like him, and I don't think there will ever be again. The kind of combination of intellect and deep knowledge and incredible sensitivity to things that you wouldn't expect someone to be sensitive about. And I know that Tom worked on that first major concert of Eric's music, and the same time we were working on the first CD for New World of Eric's music. And it was just a great good fortune on my part to have had him in my life for so many years, and to have known him and to be influenced by him. I think when I think of what a composer could be, he's as good an example as anyone I've ever known.
Oh, thank you, Larry. Thank you so much. This is so overwhelming. It's quite lovely. Sarah, you're up.
Okay. Oh, can you hear me? Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. And thank you, Belinda, and thank you, everyone. This is, it's very wonderful to have this event. And so I'm reading a thing I wrote here. So it's difficult to talk about Eric because it's been so wrenching to lose him. To me, he was a generous person and an inspiring person. I met him in the fall of 1967. He was my intro theory teacher at Mannes, so we know what that means already now. He was my intro theory teacher at Mannes, and he played an important part in my life all these years. I'll tell a few incidents to convey that I hope will convey some of that. I attended Mannes only 1 year and then moved to Philadelphia, but that extended my acquaintanceship with one of Eric's circles of friends because he came to Philadelphia to use as a workspace the apartment of a friend of his who was away during the day. Eric always sought out a conducive workspace for his projects, as you all know. And also, as you all know, he had his friends in non-overlapping compartments. So by moving to Philadelphia, I became friends through this other friend with Mark Shapiro and Barbara, the composer Mark Shapiro, and then Barbara Lengelbach, who Mark married. Then also, I was in New York often at that time, and Harley Gaber was around. It was a very freewheeling time. There was an artist, Helen DeMott, who lived on East 9th Street, some of you might know, who also brought the dancer Richard Colton from the Twylath Art Company kind of into the circle of people of that compartment of Eric's friends. It was a time Eric worked as a night custodian at a building on 57th Street, I believe, the building where Harley lived. I believe that's the case. The donut shop on the ground floor of the building was a meeting place, and also cannoli and strong espresso at Di Roberti's. In the 90s, I had moved back to New York, and our lives coincided with a different circle. Teaching at the New School in the 90s, I represented my division of the New School, Lang College, on a faculty committee where I got to know Stanley Dorn, one of the two Mannes representatives. And then through Stanley, got together with Eric and Stanley, really then through the subsequent years. Up through 2013, when I stopped teaching at New School, in his last years, through the time of his death in June 2011, Harley was experimenting with images and music. Eric would bring over to my building at 11th Street and 6th Avenue, my office there and some of the large seminar rooms. He would bring pieces that Harley had sent him for comment, and we would watch them and discuss. And that, I mean, it's not what I wrote. I mean, I'm adding to what I wrote, but Eric was so generous with the time he spent. Harley was, you know, at a bad stage, as we all know, and watching Harley's videos and discussing Harley's trajectory of life, trying to think how to phrase that, and eventually his suicide, what a tremendous talent, but he was unable to mobilize it, and the visual work was really not anything exciting. But Eric was so generous to him as a friend, taking the time and keeping that connection and spending that time with him. A few years earlier, in 2006, Eric and I shared a studio on the 12th floor of the building on the southeast corner of Bleecker and Broadway. I had an avid film editing studio there, and Eric wanted a large workspace to work on scores, eventually exhibited at the Lotus program. Eric works early mornings, and I like to work at night, so we could share the space. The studio in the building on the 12th floor there had high ceilings and tall windows looking north over the block between Broadway and the head of Crosby Street at the Bayard Condict building, which I learned is the only Louis Sullivan building in New York City. From our studio on the 12th floor, we were on the level to admire the terracotta designs on the top level of the Sullivan building. So I put that on my background here, my visual background. So you can see, he's still even looking a little up. We had a view of the building one ordinarily doesn't have. And it's even hard to find photographs of the terracotta design straight on, that like we could see through the window. But that we had tremendous light, and Eric worked on the score then. But okay, one day, and I guess that's because of our topic today, one day that Eric and I spent together that comes to mind on this occasion was Mark Shapiro's funeral. And I've been trying to find the date in my diary, so far no luck. But as I recall, it was early spring. The flowers were just coming into bloom. It was bright sunshine, but chilly with a spring wind. We took the train to New Brunswick. I'm going to cry, I'm sorry, everyone. We took the train to New Brunswick and then a cab to the house. Late in the afternoon, after spending time talking with everyone and making connections and having the food, people offered us a ride back to New York. But Eric turned down the ride offer, and it was for the best, because there was time to think, no need to pretend anything but the cataclysm of loss. So we stood out on the lawn in the sunshine and wind, waiting for a taxi to take us to the train. Another event with many of the same qualities I remember vividly from the early days. As I said, Eric was my theory teacher fall 1967 and spring 1968. He was a wonderful teacher as he unlocked the intricate interplay of structure and creativity. He showed us a book that reproduced Mozart's notebooks with Mozart's final corrections written in red. And he played some examples before and after the revision, explaining the momentous impact of a change in one or two notes. I'm sorry, I'm gonna cry. Often after class, a group of us from the class, I don't recall everyone or how many of us, but including the violinist Barry Finkler, who some of you might know, would walk around together. We didn't have money, but we'd look in pastry shop windows and admire the offerings that years later we would be able to afford. One day in particular, I recall, we were all walking around together. I believe it was after the last class in spring semester. It was late morning, June 6th, 1968. Robert Kennedy was in surgery, still alive, after being shot. We were all very aware that we were in a liminal space of the bright sunshine space we were wandering in. In a sense, the feeling of that wandering characterizes the moments that come to mind to talk about today. It was a kind of ordinariness and deep shared humanity, wandering, looking at delicious food in the windows, all wandering in a space of ordinariness and humanity, yet that brushed up against some tremendous power that we could not talk about, but might be able to express obliquely. Sorry. Thank you for hosting this.
I hope you're okay. That was fabulous, but oh my goodness. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to have to find Michael here, and will take me a
I
second.
can unmute myself, Belinda.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. It's so interesting to see so many people that I don't really know. As was just said, Eric had a way of compartmentalizing people in an amazing way. So my name's Michael Orich. I live on the Bowery. I've known Eric for a long time. I'm a painter, and he's been just an amazing, supportive friend for a long time. Yeah, I wrote a little bit. It is likely fair to say that Eric's death leaves a void in our lives, both personally and creatively. He was an incredibly smart, somehow, and somehow all-knowing. I mean, he was the most all-knowing person I ever met. You couldn't say you were going to Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and he would tell you the history of it, or anywhere. He had this love of travel, and one of the saddest things the last few years is he had this great desire to take a trip, and he just couldn't really do that. But in November, I was going to go to Venice to the Biennale. A friend of mine was the American artist there, and that was the day they had the flood. So the flood was Thursday night. I was supposed to leave Friday. And I was talking to him, and he said, "Oh, just go anyway." And I wouldn't have gone without that encouragement. So I did go, and I'm so glad I went. It was a great time to be in Venice. No one was there. But without his encouragement, which he did continually to so many people in so many ways, he kind of pushed us. Paul, that was just great to hear about your first year at Manus. It reminded me, and at the University of Iowa, Paul Allen taught freshman astronomy. And I could see having Eric as your first teacher would be like that, that great intellect kind of spurring everyone on to what needed to be done. So the last few years, I've gotten to know Stanley quite well, and he and I were kind of helping Eric out a lot as we could, as he would allow, which was not easy. You had to kind of talk Eric into allowing you to help him, which was always a task. But it was a great honor to be able to do that. And yeah, he'll really be missed. He had this incredibly ratty sweater, this Norwegian sweater, right, that we all know so well. And I happened to find one on eBay, but in mint condition, and was able to kind of it's the only thing of all these years that I gave him that I think he really wore. And I felt that as a great accomplishment in our relationship. So that was very funny. And you asked him, how are you doing? He said, "Oh, I'm fine, as he always would, but and it took so long before he would really allow you in. Oh, somehow I got muted. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Anyhow, it's a sad time. It's a sad time collectively. It's a sad time personally to lose Eric. Right now, it seems how all the more poignant. So thank you, Belinda, for organizing this, and my condolences to you and the family.
And
Thank
Michael said that he and Stanley had been helping Eric a lot. That's an understatement of the care and that you gave him. So thank you for that too. Jody Diamond. Can you, I think I've unmuted. Okay.
All right.
Hi.
Oh, wow, what an evening. Eric was, to me, above all, a good friend, like the best kind of friend that you could possibly have. And Larry's right. He was, every Hanukkah, our daughter would get a present. Every birthday, he would send me a card every year with a really long letter in it. And the cards were so good that I would keep them up all year until the next one came. And one of my favorite ones had a little girl with a birthday crown on it. And the front said, "If there's not a pony inside this card, I'm leaving this effing party." And then he was also the kind of friend who would tell me if he really liked a piece that I had composed. And he would also tell me if there was a lousy performance. I mean, he would come up and say, "That was a good piece, but you really deserve better. That did not work." And I always appreciated that. And then he would tell me what I needed to study. "You should learn this about music and you should learn that." And then he was just an honest critic, and he was always there. Eric was a member of Frog Peak Music, which is a composers collective that Larry and I started like in 1984. And we started by having people's handwritten scores, and then when someone would order them, we'd take the score and go to the copy store and we'd make a copy. But no, not with Eric's scores, because every one of Eric's scores was a handmade work of art. He cut the cover with certain colors. There'd be pieces of paper that would move back and forth. So there was no going to the copy store for Eric's scores. And in the ensuing years, as we've kind of gone digital, now people can call and say, "Oh, can I get a PDF of that score?" Sure, but not Eric's scores. Eric's scores are still the ones that have to be made, that were made by him. And they're like art objects, you know, in addition to representing his music. The last time I saw Eric, I visited him in the hospital in New York, because fortunately I had moved close enough. There, I'm there. And I just sat next to his bed and told him stories. Just, you know, not about anything, just like stories, family anecdotes, you know, you would tell. And I told him one story about how I'd gotten lost with some friends when we were cross-country skiing in California. And it had gotten foggy and we couldn't remember which way we had gone, and we didn't know how to get out. And the way we got out was we saw some ski tracks with dog prints in them. And that dog had been running all around at the beginning, but at the end it was walking in the tracks. And I said to Eric, "And this is how we got home. This is a tired dog going home. This is a tired dog going home." And that's how we got back to the car. I really wanted to be there for Eric. It's like, I said to the hospital, "Put me on the list, call me anytime." I said to Eric, I can be here for you, you know, let me be here for you. And then he went home to his apartment and he would not let me visit. I would call and he would say, no, you can't come. And it's like, what could I do? And then eventually he started moving around to different places, and I could never get in touch with him again. So the last thing I got to say to Eric was, "This is a tired dog going home." And in a way, maybe that's kind of what he was. He was really tired and just staying alive. And I'm glad the tired dog finally got to go home.
Oh dear. Me too, all of us. Thank you, Jody. Alan and Larry. Alan and Larry, I have to find you. I have to find you.
I'm on here.
Oh, good. Yay.
I'm
Hi.
calling on Larry's phone. You might say
That's why
Larry.
I was having trouble finding you. Got it. It's all yours.
Okay, I didn't want to say anything, but you twisted my arm, so I will.
That I did.
You know, we're in Albuquerque. Eric brought us here. I'm looking right now at a hummingbird, and one of my roadrunners just ran by. And Eric's house is about 10 minutes from ours. And it's still light here, and it's really gorgeous. But I have to say, Eric was probably the most exhausting person I've ever met. If you took him grocery shopping, you had to nap the rest of the afternoon. If you had a 10-minute phone call, you just had to sit down and, you know, have a cup of coffee. And of course, we saw him a lot in the 5 years that we've been here. Of course, he hasn't been here in the last year. And I guess second, he was, yes, he was a very generous person. Because when we started cleaning out the house, what, 2 weeks ago, we found an unopened 18-pack of toilet paper, because you can't find it in the grocery stores here. And we found a box of surgical masks. So, of course, we took them. And boy, I don't know what to say. I'll just say something related to your family, though. Eric wrote a piece in 1993 called My Great Aunt Julia. And that's on the CD that New World put out. And his great aunt lived in Mansfield, Ohio. Okay, in 2005, well, between the years of 2002 and 2004, Eric and I put together some sounds that then he took to Tom Hamilton, who helped him do some technical things to make the piece Final Bells, which we premiered at his birthday concert that Tom produced in January of 2005. And later that year, that piece was accepted to be performed at the Percussive Arts Society International Convention. That year was in Columbus, Ohio. So we went. We rented a car. We put the bells in the trunk. It was a large car. The bells are fairly large. And we put the luggage in half of the back seat. We stuffed Eric in the other half. And Larry and I rode in the front. He always wanted to go. We let him in the front once, but he's a nuisance. So we kept him in the back seat as much as possible. He wanted to drive. That was totally out of the question. And so we drove, and we had to stop in Mansfield, Ohio on the way on I-80, which is a couple hours, I guess, east of Columbus, which was our final destination. We stopped there for the night. The next morning, we got up and we had to drive all over the county. Because if you've ever seen the score to My Great Aunt Julia, there are maps and streams and lakes and things in this score. And Eric wanted to find out where the gypsy camp was. We drove everywhere for maybe 2 hours. Turn here, turn there, go straight. That's got to be it over there. So he settled on one place. Then we drove on and on to Columbus, and that was like 5 days of irrationality. One evening, he didn't want to walk over to the restaurant place, So we said, oh, there's an ice cream store across the street. Let's just go there and we'll get something there. He said, no. Finally, he relented. He said, I've never been in that place. I don't know what you're talking about, but you know, cleaning out his freezer here, I found 4 half-eaten Ben & Jerry's. And we knew Eric liked ice cream because if he came over for dinner and there was no ice cream, there was a little tantrum thrown. Well, we went into the ice cream restaurant and all of the staff there greeted him by name. Because he had been there like 2 or 3 times every day. But it's just his little thing. Anyway, that's I really don't know what else to say. You know, we've been cleaning out the house. It's like really intruding on somebody's life. There have been so many things. There was a book of poetry that I put in a box to you, Belinda, that has the poem that Hetty wrote about Eric. It's in that collection, or it could be another poem. I don't know. Anyway, there are a bunch of photos in there and all kinds of interesting little things. So it's been quite interesting going through all the stacks of paper in that to sort out his life, which was, you know, the most unorganized thing in the world. Oh. Like his coat, his parka with 10 pockets, and no one ever knew. He never put the same thing back in the same pocket. And I could never train him to do that. He could never find his sunglasses. So anyway, that's how I remember Eric, just in a whirlwind kind of thing.
That's Eric.
Yep.
It was complicated, and there were a lot of layers and a lot of pockets.
Yep.
Thank you.
And his wallet, Belinda.
Oh my God.
Let me just comment on the wallet. When he was well enough that he would go to the grocery store with me, we would get in line to pay, and he would hold up everything because his wallet was so fat he could not get it out of his pants. It was like the most embarrassing thing. So anyway, that I'm going to end it right there.
No, but his wallet says it all. Yes, I agree.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. Carolyn, Kay Stonefeld. I think you're unmuted. I hope so.
I think I just did, yeah. My mother called me Carolyn, but most people call me
I'm
Kay.
only going by your email. That's how I know.
Well, I did write something because I thought that but speaking of driving, he would call and say, he had a Volkswagen Beetle or something, right? Out there in Albuquerque. And he'd say, I just drove over the embankment today. I probably shouldn't be driving. And it was that kind of an experience. But my experience with Eric was, she had an amazing depth and range of emotions. I'm not sure he wanted everybody to know that. And he, and so those emotions and that intrigue entered into his concepts of sound and what about sound and how could you manipulate sound and the sensitivity of it. And and then I thought he would manipulate that sound and mask the emotional content of the music somehow, and that you'd have to look or feel to get into it, and hang with him to understand that. And so I often thought that because of that, it was like a chameleon sometimes. You didn't know exactly, and you'd have to talk to him and get into his head and his emotions. Everybody said he knew everything about everything, right? I mean, and what he didn't know, he intuited. And I read an interview with him where he was talking about sounds that he had used from an ancient language that nobody knew about, that didn't exist. And after he had used these sounds, some few years later, they discovered this language.
And I thought that, you know, that just kind of showed that he was connected. He'd been around many, many times. Eric will be back. He's not finished yet. And so I think he knew every song in the American Songbook. And you just can't associate or connect with that repertoire without a great capacity for and breadth and depth of emotion, and passion and sadness, loneliness, happiness, and humor that Eric shared with us. And he was like a hefty man. When I last saw him, he was pencil thin, and in January, it was really hard to, well, to see. If he wrote Times Racing for vibraphone, and if I wanted insights into the nuances of that, I had to go kind of watch him. He'd have these bundles of sticks in his hand, and they were different densities, one hard, one soft, you know, and they had the arthritis, and he had these sticks in his hand, and but the sensitivity was there. It was amazing. To me, it was just amazing to touch, and that you could feel the emotion that he wanted in the music. And there were some things that that bothered him, and one thing, he would come to Fredonia, and he would take the train to Buffalo, and usually coming through from New Mexico, and he constantly brought up to me his concern for the border guards on the train as they would near Buffalo. And he once attended a Peace Pole rally here on the Fredonia campus, and the local photographers were there, and he was telling me about how the CIA had spotted him in a photo and that they were looking after him, and I got really upset with them, and I said, hey, come on, cut that out. This is not funny anymore. You know, this is like, the CIA doesn't really care about you. And then almost in an instant, I realized that my half-Jewish background and socialist thinking of my parents and thought was not so far from perhaps Eric's background. And there was a genuine fear there of being labeled a communist, and the feelings of not belonging. He once said that he's an American composer, but he didn't know where he belonged in the overall scheme of American composer. And I just, I was just reflecting on it today about, well, how do we belong, and how did he feel he belonged, if he belonged, not just as a composer, but as a human being. And I guess I'll never know, we'll never know. But I can say that I'll miss the telephone commiserating. I'll miss the trips to New York City that I plan to do special things with Eric. Going to museums especially, and good food. I already missed trips to Toronto when we would go visit Robin and Eleanor. And as many have said, I'll miss the birthday cards and the Hanukkah cards. He never forgot. What a guy, you know?
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, before my mom gets to talk, one more guy, Paul Pacione. Paul, are you there? I think I've unmuted you.
I spoke, Belinda.
Hi.
I think you mean Paul Schiavo.
I mean Paul Schiavo. I'm so sorry.
It's all in the family.
Hold on.
It's two below you.
I'm getting there. Hold on. Where are you? I can't find you. Hold on a second.
I'm still here, Belinda.
There you are. There you are. Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can. Thanks.
Thanks. First of all, thanks, Belinda, for organizing this. This is really wonderful. I wasn't sure I was going to speak today, and I haven't written anything, certainly, so bear with me. It's interesting, though, coming to this after hearing so many of you, because almost everything that's been said has echoed something of my own experience of Eric. I don't think there's anything that anyone has said tonight that I haven't had a feeling of recognition of, oh yeah, right, that's Eric indeed. I met Eric some 52 years ago, and like Paul and Sarah, I met him as my first year theory teacher at Manus. And as they experienced, he was an extraordinary teacher, with an absolutely unique take on music and much else. And, I've never experienced anything quite like that before or since. And somehow we maintained our relationship pretty much constantly since then. We spent a lot of time together. We traveled together throughout the Southwest, but also in California, Pacific Northwest. We visited each other often for weeks at a time in New York, in Albuquerque, in Iowa, in San Francisco, and recently in Seattle, where I live now. And I don't know if anyone remembers, but during the 70s, and I think into the early 80s, Eric lived without a telephone. And we therefore carried on a voluminous correspondence. He was a wonderful writer. And we worked on several projects together. So I have a large store of Eric stories I could tell, and some of them are droll and funny, and some of them are infuriating. And a lot of them would probably embarrass Eric, so I won't tell them. But I'll get into what I do want to say about Eric by way of a story. It's, I suppose, not strictly a story about Eric, since he's not an actor in the story. He is kind of the subject. This was a number of years ago. I was visiting New York, and I met Eric up at Larry's studio in Midtown, where Larry kept his percussion instruments. And I don't know if you remember this, Larry.
It's Alan.
Alan, I'm sorry. Right. It's Larry's phone, but it's you.
Yes.
My bad. Anyway, we met up there, and then we decided, I think, to go out to lunch. And we left the studio and went down the elevator and into the lobby. And Eric was walking ahead, and I was back talking with Larry, and I can't remember how it happened, but Larry, I'm sorry, Alan, kind of nodded ahead to Eric and said, and I will always remember this, he's a genius, you know. And I said, without thinking of it, you know, just instantaneous reaction, just said, yes, I know, it's so annoying. And yeah, that sounds funny and it sounds glib, and I guess it is. But it strikes me that both parts of that statement are true. Eric was a genius, and I think we all know that in terms of his music. If genius comes from originality and brilliance of execution, then Eric qualifies as a genius as much as anybody I've ever known. He was also annoying because, as has been mentioned by several people and alluded to by others, he was, shall we say, a flawed human being. He could be difficult, he could be exhausting, he could be combative, he could be intolerant. He was extremely thin-skinned. And he certainly could be slovenly, all of which amounted to a deeply eccentric personality, certainly. So I think that any of us could have made the remark I made to Alan when he said that Eric's a genius, I could say that yes, and any of us could say yes, he's a genius, but difficult, but flawed, just but. He was also, of course, as has been said by others, a wonderful friend, very supportive, the soul of kindness. But I think what I've come to realize is that Eric's genius and his flaws weren't necessarily so in opposition to each other as the phrase, yes, a genius, but would imply. I think it was more, yes, a genius and, because I think the way that he lived and the way his personality was in a strange way in service to his genius, or maybe better put, part and parcel of it. There wasn't a contradiction there. I think they were necessarily linked. And I think that linkage was born of a really deep and insightful and unsparing critique of the world we live in, the society we live in. Yeah, Eric could be intolerant and combative, but he was intolerant of and combative towards the kind of crass materialism, the intellectual laziness, the cultural ignorance, all those traits that kind of define America these days, and which he just bridled at terribly. And his habits, I think, were a kind of rejection of all of that, a rejection of American society. He once even said a rejection of civilization that he felt he was in opposition to. And instead of those things, I think part of his life work and part of his genius was the discovery or creation of a way to live as an anomalous artist, which he certainly was, in an uncomprehending culture. He had to find his own way. He had to be unlike he was expected to be by anyone, certainly by the society. And this led him to all those kinds of behaviors that we think of as eccentric. And I think that the way he lived was also a form of genius. It was one that took a great deal of courage and cost him a great deal, but it gave his life a great deal of coherence and integrity that was as extraordinary an achievement, I think, as his music was. I learned a great deal from Eric, but maybe this last point is, which I only came to understand after many, many years, was maybe the most valuable lesson he imparted to me. I will always be grateful to him for that and for very much else. So thank you.
Oh. Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much. That was extraordinary. And now, my mother, Eric's sister. So certainly the one in this session that known him the longest. Can you hear me, Mom? Are you there?
Yes, I certainly can. Let me clear my voice. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You can? Good. I lost Zoom about 10 minutes ago, so I'm not seeing any faces. And faces are so important when you don't know anybody. And I don't know any of you guys until tonight, really. Eric was a little secretive, shall we say. As you have said this evening, he compartmentalized a lot of you in different boxes. And I'm just beginning to sort out those boxes tonight. It's going to take me a long, long time to actually understand where you all fit. Little boxes and big boxes and medium-sized boxes. You all have given me the same, a lot of the same thoughts that I've been thinking about in the last, particularly the last 3 or 4 months that Eric was particularly sick, and where we spent many, many, many hours and days talking on the phone. Much more time than we ever spent in all the years that we've been together as brother and sister. I think that when you talk about the fact that Eric was unique, and he was different, and he wanted always to be different. I mean, I can go back to the time when he went to Bronx Science. This came back to me just now. And my mother would occasionally go up there for parent meetings of some sort, and she would come by taxi cab. And he said, I will not let her come to school in a taxi cab. She's going to leave me off at least 10 blocks away, and I will walk from the taxi cab to school, and she can walk behind me, but she's not going to pull up in a cab at Bronx Science. So he always gave you the feeling that he wanted to live in his own way and direct his own life and his own path. He didn't want to be part of what was always kind of a middle class or upper middle class family, which is where we came from. And we always enjoyed a little bit of the success that my father had and my parents together had and gave us. And Eric rejected that from the beginning, always. And I think this is what made him and gave him the terrific sense of strength that he had through life, the ability to do things and create wonderful, wonderful music on his own. He didn't need a leader. He was the leader. This is what he wanted to be. I could go on forever, but I can't thank you guys enough for opening up the doors in your way to allow us to see more of what his friends saw of him. Because he never really did this for me. I knew a few names, but not too many. I think I always knew Paul's name. And I think that in the last couple of years, I've known about Alan Zimmerman, right? Am I right?
Yes.
Guys, you'll have to. And I certainly knew about Stanley and Michael and their wonderful care for him in the last couple of years, the overwhelming care that they gave for him. But other than that, I really didn't know too much about Eric's life. And I hope that some of this was recorded. Belinda, did you record this session tonight? Hello? Hello?
It's recorded, and I'll send everybody a link later. Sure, absolutely.
Okay. What can I say? He was wonderful as a brother. We didn't get to have enough time with him. I looked forward to my visits from Florida to New York to spend time with him at the museum, to have wonderful lunches with him. He loved food, we know that. In the last couple of years, every time I spoke to him, he'd want to know where I ate, what I had, down to the last morsel. He had to know every ingredient. When I was cooking, which he knew, and he knew I loved to cook, what did I put into it? What seasoning did I use? He was, and he loved to gossip. Oh, God, did he love to gossip. You know, just give me a little bit, Lois. Tell me a little bit. Something must be going on that I didn't hear about. And I can see that wonderful little wry smile on his face as he was licking his chops. If you told him something interesting, then it was kind of cute. What can I say, guys? You know, this could go on all night. Any questions that you'd like to know that I can answer?
Mommy, that was great. I'm going to unmute everybody now. I mean, I know it's been a long evening and a lot has been said, but you know, if there's anybody else that wants to say something, just go for it. Before I forget, I don't know if all of you know, but I mean, obviously, you know, we're in a pandemic situation, but Eric's, I have Eric's ashes, and it was his wish cremated. I didn't just decide that willy-nilly. And he has asked that his ashes be thrown from the top of the Anasazi ruin, but I don't know how to pronounce Senkawi?
Senkawi.
Senkawi in Bandelier National Monument. And I have been told that this is classic Eric, that it is illegal to do that. We will still be doing that whenever we can, probably be post-vaccine, or, you know, who knows, but I'm hoping, you know, many of you will be able to come to New Mexico and do that. And we've already discussed some of the musicians that have played Eric's music. We're already working. I say we're, like I'm playing, I have nothing to do with it at all. What will be played so that we can really have, give Eric the proper send off or toss off the mountain that he deserves.
There's a piece by Carl Maria von Weber that he wanted played at his funeral, and I can contribute that.
Okay, that's great. I only knew about the Elgar, which I played at the beginning, which was also, and I talking to some of you, the musician friends, I found it so interesting that Eric loved that Elgar piece because it seems so different than his music in every, you know, it's romantic and lyrical and big. So you know, that's another layer. That's a whole other piece of Eric. But it's a free for all now. If anybody else wants to say anything, and if not, this has been amazing, and thank you.
Anybody else talking? I'd like to give a toast, if I may. Hi. My name's Kristen. I live in the same address as Eric. I'm along with Yvonne and Eileen, who are on this memorial. Between the three of us, I think we have a collective 100 years here. If you add Eric in, that's probably going to double. So in the most recent months, there's a coffee shop on our block, so I'd kind of see him just about every other morning or so. He'd go and get his coffee and his croissants. But I just wanted to give a little toast. So if anyone has drinks, by all means raise them. This is a poem that a very good friend, my friend of 20 years, sent to me. And I think it's very just pure in its simplicity and very appropriate for all of you present here in any situation. So raise your glass. It is my joy in life to find at every turning of the road a strong arm of a comrade kind to help me onward with my load. And since I have no gold to give and love alone must make amends, my only prayer is, while I live, God make me worthy of my friends. To Eric.
Correct.
Oh,
By Frank
lovely.
Dempster Sherman. Thank you, Belinda, for doing
Very
this.
nice.
Welcome. Thank you all, and I hope you know.
Can I share this picture?
Thank you, thank you.
Please share it.
Eileen, I hear
I'd
you.
like to say thank you from Hetty in New York, only a few buildings away from where Eric lived, and thank you for
East
just
Village.
Wonderful. Yay, the East Village. But
Everybody.
that's a wonderful, it's been so wonderful to listen. I can't believe I've been totally attentive for an hour and a half. It's wonderful. Thanks again.
Oh, thanks for saying hi,
Eddie.
Sure.
So I want to share this picture. I searched my apartment upside down today, trying to find the stuff of Eric. So this is a picture of Eric. Can you see it?
Oh my God.
I can't see it. I'm only on the phone. Will you show it to me sometime?
I don't know where he was. He's on a boat somewhere, but somehow there's something about it that speaks.
Wonderful.
I think he's with Paul. He's with Paul Schiavo.
Yeah.
On their British Columbia trip.
And the other
I think so.
The other thing, here's another one. This was a review in February the 23rd. Eric Richards makes sensuous love to his peculiar sounds. You have a content, it's called Disorient Express. Salivated over his gig like the second coming of Tristan Zara. This is a concert that he did, and Alan played at that concert, and they played the part about his cousin or his aunt who was stolen by the gypsies.
Oh yeah.
Julia.
True story. It's a true story.
Nobody really knew Aunt Julia.
Yeah,
the way I did.
But the reason I remember it is because when I was little in England, in the summers, the gypsies would come around and harvest the hops in Worcestershire, where I grew up. And one of the things they would tell the kids, if you weren't being good, you would be stolen by the gypsies. I couldn't wait.
I couldn't wait.
Stolen by the gypsies. So when I heard that piece, I thought she succeeded in getting stolen by the
Mom, did she
But
ever
she
come
was
back?
returned unharmed at the end of the summer.
Well, that was okay.
I think she was really with her boyfriend.
I guess that could have been a review of the Lotus concert, but I'd never seen that before.
It was.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It must be.
It was. It was
Yeah.
reviewed by a guy called Kyle Gunn in the Village.
Oh, that's the Village Voice review.
Yeah, Village Voice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I went to that.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So save all these things so that we can take photos and anything that people have to share, that would be great. And I will send everybody anything I get, and if I figure out where this recording is, I'll be sending that to you too.
Oh, I would love to have it.
Stanley's raising his hand. Stanley.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one quick thing.
Hi, Stan.
Hi, everybody. It's as everyone has said, Eric had quite a compartmentalized life. I know many of you. I've met many of you at various times, and know of many of you, and it's kind of, you are a remarkable group, and it's kind of an amazing part of Eric's personality to see you all as well. I just wanted to say a couple of thoughts. I hadn't planned anything, and felt, knowing Eric as we all do, bad that I'm not better prepared, because Eric certainly would have been very well prepared, as he was for everything. And a couple of things I just wanted to say was that I didn't know Eric at Mannes, but I teach at Mannes, and as you know, particularly Paul and Sarah and Lenny and Paul, Mannes had, and arguably still does, but had the kind of premier traditional theory department in the country, I would have to say. I don't think anyone would argue with me about that. And Eric, of course, taught there in, I guess, the late 60s. And I was there, but didn't know him then, because I was a mere guitar player. And, but I could just say that Eric was, like very few people, respected by that theory department, by Schachter and by Salzer. Those people all I would say, and Eric, of course, left, as in so many things in his life, left in a huff. Or probably would still be there if he hadn't, because Salzer was Schachter's teacher and Schachter was Eric's teacher and Schachter was my teacher, and as all of those people. And of those guys, Loeb, Schachter, Salzer, those guys had this phenomenal respect for him. And I didn't know that for a while. And then when I realized that through talking with people, I was kind of like another dimension of Eric. And the other thing I would just say is that, two quick things. One is that I have a copy of a paper that Eric wrote when he was at NYU for Gustav Ries. And it's Kyrie and Trope in Carolingian Times. And it's a short 14-page paper that he wrote for Ries, in which he describes, kind of contrary to a lot of knowledge at the time, the evolution of the place of the Kyrie in the Mass.
Wow.
And apparently Kyrie, the original Kyrie, was not its own thing, but was something that was said after the litany of indulgences that people wanted said. People would say Kyrie eleison the way we might say hallelujah or God bless you. And it evolved gradually into what we now know. And so this is a paper documenting that through sources, of course, in French, German, Italian, that Eric had referenced. And it's a 14-page paper with 49 footnotes. And I just wanted to read what Ries said on the front cover. It just says, and by the way, I'll say that Ries, who many of you know, went through it and circled and excised commas on that. He's graded the paper on that level. And then on the front of the cover it says, excellent. If you have an extra copy, I should very much like to have it for my files. Also, I should very much like to have a word with you about this. And I thought, this is no small thing for those of us who knew Ries. And the other thing I would say to Lois, which is that it's too bad you never got to New Mexico, because you were going to come in September, I guess, 2 years ago. And
I think it was 2016.
Yeah, and only because you were coming did he finally break down and have a floor put in the bathroom.
I think he also bought a television set. Didn't he buy a TV set?
Yes, he did. We took him to buy a TV set.
He said he was buying a TV set because of me.
Yes, he did. All the time.
Oh dear.
Yeah, he was.
And also, when you were coming, I was supposed to pretend to be an Uber driver and pick you up at the airport and then take you around wherever you wanted to go because he couldn't drive anymore. But he didn't want any interaction between us. I was pretending to be an Uber.
I love it. That was his wonderful secret side. Oh, God.
I just want to say that, there's so many wonderful manuscripts. I know that most of them are with Frog Peak at this point, but I'm wondering if anybody is thinking towards an archive someplace of Eric's works, his oeuvre, that paper, and the scores and things like that. Where they be preserved in a library of sorts, Lincoln Center perhaps. Or...
This is Judy Klein, and I hope very much that all of his work will be preserved. I do think that New York Public Library is a good, would be an appropriate place, but really any place.
I know that. Well, it will all be discussed, and we will be back at you, and there are a couple of people that Eric has specifically put in charge of that.
Great.
So
And that's wonderful.
And he thought good and hard about it, and he made good choices. So
Great, wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good to know.
All right, guys. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Yes.
inviting me
Thank
to
you so
read
much.
the poem I wrote for him. I really appreciate it, and I just loved listening to everybody's stories because, you know, as just somebody who was a friend up the block, and now I know more about Eric than I ever knew before.
Somebody put up a plaque on the tree outside our building.
That's right.
I don't know who did it.
Oh,
Nobody does.
I don't know who did it, but
No
the
one
poem,
knows.
Hang on. I sent Belinda a photograph of the plaque and the tree and the 2 poems that are on it.
oh, good.
It was quite hard to read, but I got the idea.
Oh, wow.
Somebody can do a better photography than I can then. It's still on the tree.
It is. Well, maybe I'll try and take a picture and see what I can
That would
do.
be great.
Okay. All right.
It's great though. It's a wonderful thing.
It was a wonderful, wonderful thing to do, and I'm so glad to have been invited. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you to everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good night.
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 Good night.